I was like pounding the table for Jameson Williams, and then we had that really, really slow start to the season. Now things for Jameson Williams, it's like the roller coaster ride for Jameson Williams, where over the last 7 weeks, we've had 5 games with 16 points or more, and then 2 0-pointers. But everything's coming up Jameson Williams for the playoffs. It's finally happening. And I think it's Jameson Williams' season all throughout the playoffs. I think Jameson Williams can end up being so good that both of you guys, when we get to the offseason, are going to say, I can't draft Jameson Williams here in round 4. You guys are going to stay away from Jameson
This is where he went last year. He's going to be round 2.
Fine.
Yeah,
round
this
3,
is all,
round 3.
I'm so pissed. Jameson drafters
are going to get bailed out.
Yeah. Jameson bailout, guys. We're cashing the checks.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Bold predictions for the fantasy football playoffs. We're identifying players that can take their game to another level that should be in your fantasy lineup. We're talking about some league winners. School of Scott Fantasy Football Podcast. Theo Gremminger and Scott Barrett every week on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network and on Fantasy Points YouTube. And we're joined by a repeat guest. Pat Kerrane joined us this summer. That show was absolute fire. Happy to get you back here, Pat, with 1 week left in the fantasy regular season. We're going to go through a lot here on this show. Pat, how you doing today, man?
Doing good, yeah. Excited to talk some football.
Awesome. And Scott, we had a couple of sweats. We're still tilting out about. We're going to review our teams next week on School of Scott. But let's get it started here with Pat. Pat, let's talk about Lamar Jackson, because you're enjoying a not-so-fun sweat in one of your guillotine leagues now. Lamar Jackson is basically unplayable at this point. Another fantasy dud. And sort of this one was really tilting because for a lot of us with Lamar Jackson, we were circling these Cincinnati games down the stretch as sort of the light at the end of the tunnel. Anything but that. Another fantasy dud. Your thoughts on Lamar?
Yeah, so I, like a jackass, started Lamar Jackson this week. Unplayable, but tell that to me before Thursday, because with Drake Maye's offensive line, and people listening to this will know how that worked out. I don't yet. We're recording this Monday. But with the injuries to Will Campbell and also to their left guard, I was, I was like, hey, why do I even have Lamar Jackson on this guillotine league if I'm not going to play against the Bengals? I'm gonna throw him in here, and that's probably going to get me eliminated. I also had Barkley, JT, JSN, just a bunch of disappointing performances. So, but if Wan'Dale Robinson ends up having a quiet game, I'll survive. But yeah, I mean, it's just like the Bengals are I know they've been a little bit better over the last couple weeks, but that's like the matchup. And so we've been like, Lamar was on the practice report early last week with a toe, and then he was fine. But like, clearly something's not right. He does not look like Lamar. I know he's running around a little bit, but he does not really look like Lamar throwing the ball or running the ball, really. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but it's definitely like I was thinking, if I survive, because Maye has a bye, like if I survive, I'm probably going to drop Lamar and try to get like Stafford or Purdy, like guys I would never consider playing over Lamar last year. But that's where I'm starting to think, what I'll need to do rather than going back to the well. I think he has the Steelers in week 14.
Scott, are you benching Lamar everywhere? Like, if you still are alive in week 14 and you have Lamar Jackson, he hasn't had a rushing touchdown since week 1. It's absolutely wild stuff.
I don't think he's had a touchdown in 3 games in 3 weeks now.
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, before that, Pat, he went 28 straight games with a touchdown. The next closest quarterback was at like 17 straight, and then 3 straight games. It's insane. So clearly something is wrong. And if you dig into the numbers, you'll see he's not running, when last year running a lot. I mean, this is Lamar Jackson, right? And so I think Lamar Jackson is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. I think he is an easy top 2 fantasy quarterback when he's fully healthy. And why that is, a lot of it comes down to the strain he puts on a defense with his hyper mobility, how you have to play him, how you maybe with a QB spy, or you bring the linebackers up closer to the line of scrimmage, because of this threat of Lamar Jackson as a runner. But if he's hurt, if he's hobbled, and you're less threatened by that, you could play him honestly. And Lamar himself morphs into just a pure pocket passer. Whereas, yeah, like a hobbled Lamar Jackson, a non-running Lamar Jackson, is that a bottom 10 starting quarterback in the NFL? Yeah, I think it probably is. And then you're also losing out on the Konami code, the fantasy cheat code of what he can do with his legs. So yeah, I'm going to be benching a Lamar Jackson for a Jacoby Brissett easily. And he is going to rank lower in my rank. I just
kind of
can't trust him right now. The caveat here, right, isn't it? But by the way, I had a few subscribers reach out to me. It's like, hey, I followed your draft guide and my teams are stacked and I'm doing great, except I listened to you in the everything report. And now my team's falling off a cliff because of you. I traded for Lamar Jackson. I was, the injury experts were really optimistic. And I was like, this is a great buy low opportunity. He's going to come back. He's going to smash. Baltimore's defense has regressed and it's rough. It's ugly. And so, yeah, that is the caveat here. Is a lot of the injury experts I've talked to are surprised by this. I think you watched the game last week. A lot of it was bad luck. And escapability in the pocket was there. And so he is going to keep getting healthier every week, but just after what we've seen, I don't know how you can trust him.
It's an absolute mess for Lamar Jackson fantasy managers. Hopefully you added, like Scott said, a quarterback like a Jacoby Brissett. It's absolutely wild that I'm even saying that with Lamar Jackson and Jacoby Brissett in the same context. Pat, I had a start-sit decision this past week, and I was setting my lineups like Thursday morning, going through them before Thanksgiving, and I put Emeka Egbuka in for Justin Jefferson, and then I caught myself like 15 minutes later, and I'm like, what are you doing? Take that one out. Loaded dynasty team. Emeka Egbuka ends up putting like a 4-catch game up. I'm like, oh, this was smart. You have Justin Jefferson rocking. And then Jefferson had the worst game of his entire career with Max Brosmer behind center. This is really, really ugly stuff. It's not quite to the level that we're seeing with Lamar Jackson, but with Justin Jefferson, well, in most weeks, but Justin Jefferson now in 3 out of his last 4 games has had single-digit fantasy scoring, and he hasn't scored 12 points in a month. This is ugly stuff. They have a schedule that looks sort of fantasy-friendly for Week 14 and the fantasy playoffs. But are you going to be able to trust him, or is it just sort of a bet on the talent? It's Justin Jefferson. You can't bench Justin Jefferson type mentality for you, Pat.
So heading into last week, he still had over 2 yards per route run, which, I mean, was just kind of like a miracle given how bad McCarthy has been. He won't have, he'll be below that now. But, yeah, I mean, I had him as a low-end wide receiver 1. I kind of like low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, kind of borderline there. And it was very much just like it's Justin Jefferson was really the thinking behind that, because Brosmer, I was not optimistic in my write-up of him. I was like, this UDFA looks like a UDFA was basically my write-up. And man, did he ever, he bombed out. Like I believe he had minus 27 EPA. He was like a human blowout in that game. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like, what are you hoping happens with the Vikings? Like, it's like hard for me to see what the optimism is. At the same time, like, he was still kind of producing. So I think he's probably, like, being realistic, he's probably like a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 type of guy. I don't know that you're like definitely benching him, but he's just like way, way, way less reliable than he really ought to be, given how talented he is.
Scott,
I was thinking about, like, I love the takes that sound insane, but like are actually proved to be prescient. And it's like, It's been really bad for Justin Jefferson since week 9. He's averaging like 28 yards per game. Worst game of his career, 4 receiving yards. Julio Jones during his peak, 8-year stretch, never had a game under 15 receiving yards, and he was routinely shadowed by the best cornerbacks in football. He has, tougher target competition. You look at, Jamar Chase, these other alpha wide receiver ones, where it's like, yeah, they've had shitty backup quarterbacks come in, Jake Browning, and they've still produced at a really high level. This fall off for Justin Jefferson, is it really concerning? Is he maybe a little overrated? He's not a Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua tier receiver, or, I mean, that's a narrative you can run with. Or is this just like the ultimate buy low in dynasty? You're never going to get this opportunity again. I think that is probably the case. And I think things have to trend up. You and I were talking about this because we had Jefferson in the playoffs in an FFPC team. And you're like, that has to be a unique combination because most Jefferson teams are probably dead, right? And it's like I feel like things have to be better than they've been. I don't know what really can explain it. When you have the roster talent in Minnesota, that's not that bad. Kevin O'Connell, who I thought was like a brilliant genius offensive play caller. And you've just had the worst quarterback play to where you can target Jefferson 12 times and it produces a 2.0 yards per target average. I'm going to be a little bit more bullish, I think, than where you're going to have him ranked just because it's Justin Jefferson, just because the target volume is there, and we should get McCarthy back this week. But yeah, it's really one of the more head-scratching things of the season.
I mean, saying don't worry, we're getting McCarthy back is like so bearish. That's so bearish. Yeah. I mean, this guy's like literally like his EPA per game going back to 1999. There's 2 guys worse in the entire, like 200 plus dropbacks. There's literally 2 quarterbacks have been worse. It's like Chad Hutchinson and Ryan Lindley, I think. He's like significantly worse than Josh Rosen. This is like a uber mega bust type of situation.
Yeah, it's really, really awful. You look at the data, it's historically bad. I will say he has run bad, and I'm thinking about it from like a pass catcher standpoint. He ranks behind only Jameis Winston hero throw rate. That's basically big time throw rate. But an inordinately high number of those have been dropped. Dealing with a lot of drops.
That's not on his receivers. That's on him.
You think that's because of like the velocity?
I think he rifles every single throw. Yeah. It's so bad. Like he had a throw bounce off Adam Thielen's hands. And it's like, dude, that's Adam Thielen. Like he can't really run anymore, but he can catch. Like, and it's just it's when he has a throw in stride, hits a guy in stride over the middle, like 15 yards downfield, and he's got velocity on the ball. It looks sick. Like he has some really kind of highlight throw, to his game, but he's going for that every single time. It's like, 5 yard out. He's got to like fire it. It's like, dude, put a little touch on the ball. And I really think he's setting his receivers up to fail with that stuff. I really don't think that. I mean, sure, maybe he's run a little bit bad, but you watch him play and it's like, God, like, please just put a little touch on the ball sometimes. And I think it's like, yeah, he's got a cannon for an arm, but like, Drake Maye can throw it 40 yards downfield and it looks like it's floating down into his receiver's hands. Like it is possible to throw far with touch.
Yeah, I still think like, yeah, JJ McCarthy could be so utter dog shit, but it's like, how many good fantasy wide receivers have we seen produce with awful quarterbacks? All of them, just about all of them. DeAndre Hopkins with Brock Osweiler, Josh Gordon with like every quarterback. The target volume is there. And by the way, just for some more context about like how insane this is like largely the same roster as 2023. Nick Mullins started 3 games. Here are his passing yards in those 3 games at the tail end of 2023 with basically the same roster: 303, 411, 396 passing yards. And so, yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'll say I'm a little more bullish just because it is Justin Jefferson. It is Kevin O'Connell. And I feel like things can't be worse than they've been, but yeah, boy, are things bad.
Where do you think you'll end up ranking him like weekly? Because I've been kind of holding the line, but this last one broke me a little bit where I'm like, I don't know. Like, what am I doing this for? Like, is he a top 20 receiver? I'm not sure he is.
Probably fringe top 15.
Okay.
I will say I was more pessimistic on Jefferson like 6 weeks ago. I think before anyone else was kind of talking about this, it was just like looking at the production with in games Jordan Addison played in full. There was very little difference in the production. It was like they were both low end wide receiver ones, which isn't like how most people value Justin Jefferson, and with only like a 0.9 fantasy point per game gap over Addison. So this is something we've talked about for a while on this show. And now, worse quarterback play, it gets even worse. And I talked to some of our film charters, fantasy points data film charters, who were telling me that like Jefferson just doesn't look like himself this year. Like, yeah, quarterback play is an issue, but it's perhaps like a lack of effort on some plays you're seeing, which you've never seen before. You're seeing like cornerbacks clamp down on him and not getting separation, which you've never seen before. So this could also be, I feel like I'm thinking this out as I'm saying it, but this could also be one of those things where I wonder if, at the end of the year, it comes out, oh, he had this injury that went underreported. Yeah. And maybe that's also why these quarterbacks look so bad.
Yeah, I honestly do think it really is the quarterback play driving it for the most part. I think one thing you look at with McCarthy that also jumps out is his success rate is horrible. And that's something where I think, it's a more stable metric than something like EPA because you get just one data point per play. But his success rate's only better than Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders this year, and now Max Prosmer. But it's really quite bad. And it's to the point where when you have a quarterback with a success rate well below 40%, the rushing success rate's probably going to be higher than that. And so it starts to affect the play calling. And that's what we've seen with the Vikings, is that they've shifted hard to the run over the last few games. They were again run heavy this past week, which, makes sense with the UDFA quarterback in his first start. But I think with McCarthy, one of the things that worries me is even if he starts to play better, I think it could be kind of Michigan ball, where it's like we're just running the ball, and then trying to get like more of a highlight throw out of it. Like maybe he can succeed like Sam Darnold with the Seahawks and like that type of offense, if he has a path to success, which I don't think he does, but if he does, it's probably that. And that's also bad for Jefferson, right? Like you're like now the volume, because Addison is good, to your point. So like when you look at like Jacoby Brissett's efficiency has not been good, but his success rate's been consistently pretty solid. And they're like, this is our best bet. The running game stinks. We're just going to drop back a million times. That's what they did with Nick Mullins. We've seen O'Connell do that in the past. I don't think he does that with McCarthy, and certainly not Prosmer. And Wentz is on IR, so we're stuck with these two guys for the rest of the year. So as far as a dynasty buy low, I completely agree. There's no way this can be what they do next year. Like they have to, like, you trade for Mac Jones, you bring in Kyler Murray. You draft somebody. Like this cannot be what they do, or they're going to get fired. Like Kevin O'Connell will go from winning Coach of the Year to 2 years later getting fired. If they do this again next year, it's that bad. So therefore, I don't think they'll do it. And so from a 2026 perspective, I think he's a buy low. But I'm starting to get. I just don't see the path to how he kind of breaks out of this slump to close the year.
Pat, people know you from chip chasing and also legendary upside. Talk about how they can access legendary upside, what you have cooking for the rest of the season.
Yeah, legendary upside. I do a write-up of all the games called the walkthrough, previewing the games each week. You can check that out. Head on over, sign up for the free newsletter. I always have the first couple games free each week, and then I narrate the article for paying subscribers. It's $10 a month over there for the subscription. We also have playoff best ball that we're launching Potentially by the time you're listening to this, we'll be live. But in the Discord, we'll have updates on that. And we've got a tool called the Sidekick that provides dynamic rankings for these playoff best ball contests, which I think are a ton of fun. And it's very strategic in terms of actually trying to build teams that can make runs in the playoffs, but still score enough points each week to keep your team alive. So it's one of my favorite things, one of my favorite types of fantasy. So you can check that all out at legendaryupside.com, and then check out Ship Chasing over on the Ship Chasing YouTube channel I do with Pete Overzet, Jacob Sanderson, and Davis Maddock.
Yeah, highly recommend all of Pat's work, and Legendary Upside, really some strong stuff you're putting out there, Pat. Scott, the Black Friday sale, the Cyber Monday sale, the sales seem to be going well. A lot of people took advantage of those. If you missed out on our sales to get Fantasy Point subscriptions, what's the next sort of deal coming up here where people could access our work?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to wait a couple of weeks for it, but that would be our early bird special. So if you're a current subscriber or if you missed out on the Black Friday deals, you can wait for that. You're going to get our 2026 subscriptions at the lowest cost possible, and then you'll get the remainder of 2025 for free. And so that's active through late March, and then best deal possible on 2026.
Yeah, keep an eye out. There'll be emails. We'll drop it on social media as well. Pat, when you came on the show, I think this was August, guys, when we podcasted together, all three of us were on De'Von Achane and the value that he presented to drafters. That was sort of the time of the year where some people were pivoting off of Achane. There were some injury concerns. There was general Miami Dolphins vibes concerns. It's been anything but that. Achane's been just spectacular this season. He's had 8 RB1 finishes on the year. 3 straight 100-yard or more rushing performances for him. Really strong stuff for Achane. Pat, your thoughts on Achane? It's sort of going under the radar here. A lot of people have talked about Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, recent weeks Jahmyr Gibbs, but Achane sort of has that outcome where he could just wreck leagues in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, he absolutely could, because he's been so consistent, and he's been, able to hit spike weeks, and you get almost McCaffrey level receiving work. And then you also have him being such an efficient runner. And then, he just had 22 carries this past week. So, Mike McDaniel is far from a perfect offensive coach, but he's pretty good about getting his playmakers the ball. And they lose Tyreek Hill. Waddle gets a lot more work. They do like a little bit more with Malik Washington and stuff, but it's kind of like De'Von Achane and Jalen Waddle are going to be the guys who make this offense go. And he's not been shy about just giving them really healthy workloads. So I don't have enough Achane. I was hammering Brock Bowers there, and I ended up being a little lighter on Achane than I wish I was now. But he's one of the strongest picks you could have made this year.
Yeah, and Scott, it seems like it doesn't matter how he's getting the ball, but he's getting there in terms of the scoring. This is the first time that we've seen De'Von Achane not have a single reception in a game, and he still gets you 19.4 points scored. I mean, it's like this guy's unbelievable right now.
Yeah, it's great. It kind of reminding me of like Christian McCaffrey light, mini Christian McCaffrey, where you have really good production and volume on the ground, and then he's basically Miami's wide receiver one. You mentioned Jalen Waddle. The production has been strong since Tyreek Hill went down, but the volume actually hasn't been great, and it's kind of Achane serving as their Christian McCaffrey. So you have this really high floor, really good ceiling when everything's working. And so, yeah, I think he's a super valuable fantasy asset. I think the way you had it laid out in the show sheet was like, is this going to be the running back you needed for the fantasy playoffs? I don't think he's quite on CMC's level, where it's just he's hit 17.5 fantasy points every game but one. Leads the position in fantasy points per game by a good margin. And it's just so hard to combat that sort of consistency with upside. Whereas like Jonathan Taylor, a little more volatile. You have the 40-point weeks, but like if you outscore your opponent by 20 points, you're going to win that, anyway. So like the extra points kind of don't go that far. So I think McCaffrey is really still just, and you see this in wins above replacement fantasy war. I think just like such a potent cheat code. And then, but yeah, then it's him or Gibbs with like who has the better ceiling. Cause a lot of it just comes down to who dominates throughout the playoffs. I would give that edge to Gibbs. So I think I would have it. I think I would still have him 4. Or actually maybe now with this Daniel Jones injury, 3 above Jonathan Taylor. What do you think about that, Pat?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, the Colts, they did not look on this guillotine league. I also have Jonathan Taylor, so that I'm stung by that. But they did not. Jones is not able to move like he was before. So, and the Colts have. It's been kind of a delicate balance, I would say, their offense. It's like everything's working just so to get Daniel Jones to be playing at this level, and him playing through a fractured leg is not going to help.
Another running back that when you were on the show this summer, Pat, we talked about the value that Bucky Irving presented in round 2. If I remember this correctly, at the beginning of the summer, you were maybe not totally into Bucky Irving, and then you started sort of pivoting and being into drafting him at cost, sort of that 2-3 turn value. We had to deal with sort of the ups and downs of Bucky Irving managers. Started off the year with this outstanding usage and really, really strong production, averaged 18 points per game, then missed this like really prolonged period of time, finally made his return. And I was very, very pleased with the usage. I talked about it on Fantasy Football Daily. This was not like a ramp up where I thought the volume might have been lower than this one. It ends up with 17 carries for 61 yards and a touchdown. Had another touchdown called back on sort of an unnecessary holding penalty. Also adds 2 catches for 20 yards. Really positive stuff with Bucky Irving. Is Bucky Irving going to have a massive impact here in the fantasy football playoffs? What are your vibes from his first game back and sort of your expectations moving forward?
Yeah, you're right that I was kind of a little bit lukewarm on Bucky at first, and then I started to get really bullish on him because of the receiving, and just looking at how strong his receiving efficiency was as a rookie. And one of the things that I've looked at when I look at the legendary seasons and trying to find these running backs who break out and just completely win leagues, is that if you are betting on a guy to see a jump in receiving usage, it's very helpful to kind of concentrate your bets on the year 2 guys, because we are kind of more willing to project, hey, his receiving role is going to grow this year than coaches tend to be. But the year 2 guys, that is the year where it's like, hey, you now come in, you actually completely understand everything that's going on in terms of the pass protection. There's more trust there. You have your first full NFL offseason, and we will see guys step up. And with Bucky, it's like, hey, you already stole half the Rachaad White role. Why don't you steal the rest? And I think that's what we were going to get if he stayed healthy. He's up to 2.05 yards per route run now, which is elite. And, he's at 1.62 last year. It's a limited sample, but we've gotten the receiving breakout from Bucky so far. And like you mentioned, I mean, he had 17 carries this past game, so they were not easing him back in. The Bucs early in the year, their offensive line was a mess. They've got their center playing tackle, Wirfs was out, just a number of injuries across the line, and everyone's good now. The line's healthy, and the passing game is starting to struggle. The Bucs have actually at several different points this year gone quite run heavy. They did this against the Bills. This is not a team that's like committed to airing it out, even though they do tend to end up in these games that are kind of shootouts. So I could see down the stretch, the Bucs really pivoting to featuring Bucky and that being like a core part of their identity. They've got a great run defense on the other side, and kind of like pivot away from some of these high pass rate games that we've seen them get themselves into. So yeah, I think Bucky's I'm very hopeful.
Scott, weeks.
Yeah. Also worth mentioning the upcoming strength of schedule: Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Miami. That's pretty elite. That's good, favorable game script. And to Pat's point, yeah, like I was saying, I think Baker Mayfield's seriously hurt, 2 weeks ago before that shoulder injury. And so, yeah, it makes sense for this to be a more run centric, Bucky Irving centric offense, especially with those matchups.
Week 17, we get De'Von Achane and Bucky Irving. That game, we don't have to worry about weather. That could be the one that fantasy managers need to have some access to. Very, very bullish about Bucky Irving. One player that I'm a lot less bullish about than I was a couple weeks ago is Rico Dowdle. Pat, after what we saw yesterday with the Chuba Hubbard usage, is Rico Dowdle's season officially canceled or officially not looking as good? Did we go from like a low-end RB1 to like maybe a flex type play? Or do you think things could look a little different when Carolina comes out of their bye week?
I don't think I think he's more kind of an RB2 type of play. I mean, he's still got plenty of work. The Panthers just ran the ball. They had a sub 40% pass rate this past week. So, I think that's when you have that level of running the ball, then you're going to be, you can't give a guy like 35 carries. So they mixed in Chuba, and Chuba looked good. I think, that's a little bit of a concern. But we've seen Dowdle consistently dominate the backfield carries. 2 weeks ago it was the opposite problem. He had, I think, 6 carries, but they just couldn't get the run game going. So I would rather have this. I would rather have them beating the Rams by running the ball down their throat, and have Chuba mixing in substantially as well, but them being very effective overall and on the ground. I think is a better sign than the run game kind of getting stifled. So I don't think it's over. I do think him being like the highly projectable RB1 that he was is probably over.
Scott, are you sort of in that same bag when it comes to Dowdle? Are you a little more pessimistic about this situation?
Yeah, I mean, this is disappointing. This was, one of our highest owned players, who we got super late, and it's just tough to trust now. Yeah, I think it's still like more valuable than you think, just because the Dave Canales backfield has always been top 3 in XFP per game, regardless of game script. But you go from being an Uber bell cow to stuck in this committee. It's not great.
Pat, this week we should get Omarion Hampton back. Kamani Vidal's been really strong in this role. Vidal, when we go back and we look at the best waiver wire ads you could have made this season, he's got to be in the mix at the running back position. 3 100-plus yard rushing performances from Vidal, filling in for Hampton. What's your expectation levels for Omarion Hampton when he returns? I talked about this on Fantasy Football Daily. We love to get to see a guy in the regular season before we have to trust them in the playoffs, like we did with Bucky Irving this past week. Let's say Hampton comes back this week. Are you throwing him right into your lineups, or are you in this potential split mentality where Vidal's done enough that he could limit Hampton? Sort of what's your optimism level here for the Omarion Hampton in the fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, I think my starting position would probably be thinking of him kind of like in a Kenneth Walker-y type of molds, where you have Vidal as sort of a Chardonnay. Like there will be a split, I would imagine, to begin, but then perhaps Hampton is the more talented guy, takes over the backfield down the stretch. That would be my hope. I think a little bit of the issue for Hampton is that he hasn't been like a dominant receiver. He's been used as a receiver, but he's not been super efficient. 1.08 yards per hour, and he's been kind of fine. And it would be a little bit easier if we had that out of like, well, it's split, but he's just such a good receiver, right? He'll get there anyway. I think his path is more like he's the clear lead back and he's running well on a good offense. And at least for the next couple weeks, I would anticipate that it would be at least somewhat split.
Scott, are you there with Pat on this one, or are you a little more optimistic? Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what the split looks like. If they let Hampton just be the guy, then I think his floor is what we've got from Vidal, which has been great. You look at the Chargers last the 5 games he's played in which the Chargers won. He had 126 rushing yards and a touchdown, 95 rushing yards and a touchdown, 117 rushing yards and a touchdown, 124 yards, no touchdown. And then one game against the Titans, he flopped, but they trailed for 3 full quarters. And so basically, what does this mean? It's like, hey, a guy who can be a fantasy RB1 in victories, that's like his floor, game script dependent workhorse. But if the target volume Hampton got over his last few games that Vidal did not get is real, then he could be a bell cow. He could be, but again, it kind of depends on how much they, want Vidal to be involved. Vidal has been an uber bell cow or really stranglehold on the backfield touches, which Hampton got before his injury. But if it's a committee, then this is gross.
Yeah, it's definitely a tilting one for sure. All right, Pat, let's talk about it. Nico Collins. Nico Collins was a player that for a while looked like one of the worst draft picks you could have made. But if your team had somehow survived the slow start to the year, it's been some really, really strong stuff over the last few weeks. Where are you at with Nico Collins? Your confidence level with him heading into the playoffs? We saw on Sunday CJ Stroud returned to the lineup, and the target volume remained what it was with Davis Mills. Collins now has 20 points or more in 3 out of his last 4 games played. And again, the high-level target earning that we expected when we drafted him has been there. 10 targets or more in now 5 out of his last 6 games played.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel better about Nico Collins, and I think the passing game has just had a little bit more life to it. We're finally getting Jaden Higgins, out there running routes at a decent rate. But at the same time, I don't think Higgins is like coming for Collins' targets necessarily. He's just like a more efficient secondary option for the offense. So I think it's helpful to have him out there because I think it just makes the Texans a little bit more potent on offense. And they've gotten decent production out of the slot. It's split between Kirk and Knoll, but they're getting some production there. Schultz has been pretty good, surprisingly good. Woody Marks and Nick Chubb are just like, it's rough, but like Marks he'll occasionally give you like enough bursts to kind of like keep things moving a little bit. So the offense overall just feels like it's starting to come to life enough. They have an elite defense, so it's tough for them to get pushed, as much as we would like and be kind of in high pass rate environments. But it does feel like the team, as far as the offensive identity goes, is starting to be built a little bit more around the passing game. And Collins has been really good this year, like as far as the efficiency goes on his routes. It's just been, he's missed time. And they haven't had a ton of drop back volume. So if we get them leaning into the pass a little bit more in terms of the identity, I think, I'll probably still have him ranked as like a low end wide receiver 1, maybe mid range wide receiver 1, but he can definitely keep spiking.
Scott, mid range wide receiver 1 sound about right for Nico?
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways to look at. Like I was a little concerned about Stroud because Nico has 2 100-yard games with him dating back to September of last year. But to the point here is a lot of that was pass volume related. And the Texans, 4 straight victories were their 4, pass heaviest games. Before that, they were 2-5, something like that. And still very stubbornly run heavy or not a lot of pass volume, despite negative game script, despite not having talented running backs whatsoever. And yeah, you have a talented receiving core in Nico, who was the yards per route run leader over the previous 2 seasons. Dalton Schultz has been super productive. Jaden Higgins coming on. And so yeah, I'm more bullish. I'd say low end fringe wide receiver one, just given track record, but it's been double digit targets in 5 of his last 6. Almost hit that 100 yards
98
last
Yeah.
week. So
Um,
yeah,
and like early in the year, I was pretty frustrated with the Texans offense and like, wow, they cannot get this OC figured out. But Nick Caley is first year OC, first year play caller, and was kind of seen as like potentially like one of the next guys. He's got like an awesome pedigree with the Rams and the Patriots, kind of like potentially blending these systems and stuff. And I don't know, like maybe he's kind of figuring it out now. It's like it's his first year doing it, and they weren't succeeding early on, but they're mixing some things up. The personnel's changing a bit, and Stroud's now back healthy, so it would kind of make sense if this team started clicking a little bit down the stretch, given that they've got a first year guy running the show.
yeah, and I mean, an easy solution to fixing it is getting Nico Collins 10 plus targets every week.
I agree.
That was the nicest thing anyone said about Nick Caley on one of my podcasts since the summer, Pat. So that was really a positive step for Nick Caley. A big shout out to Nick Caley there. Pat, CeeDee Lamb, big bounce back on Thanksgiving, 24 fantasy points, had 7 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown, 9 targets. George Pickens still had 13 targets, 6 catches for 88 yards. This is the best wide receiver combination in football. If you had to pick one of them to roster for the rest of the season for any of your teams, who would it be?
It's still Lamb. I think we just have more confidence that he's like a superstar, and he moves around the formation a little bit more than Pickens, who's typically on the outside. So I think that gives him like a little bit more of a floor, I would say. Just like kind of slightly more confidence week to week that he'll be able to get his targets. But Pickens has been awesome. I mean, Pickens is someone I was very high on this past offseason, and I just felt like people were just kind of missing the point with it's like, oh, like he's a head case, like Tomlin doesn't want him. It's like, well, maybe Tomlin doesn't get Tomlin, who by the way can't figure out how to get a quarterback. Like we're that confident in Tomlin's evaluation of things? Like this dude has been really efficient with terrible quarterback play his entire career. He gets to go play with Dak now. Offense or defenses can't focus on taking him away. It's just awesome to see him blossom here. I think, it'll just kind of come down to the way defenses play it to some. I mean, they had against the Eagles a couple weeks ago, they were able to get him on Adoree Jackson, who's the weak spot of that defense, at a very high rate. And it's like, he's going to win those matchups, So it's like the Cowboys have 2 wide receiver ones now. And the defense is really going to have to decide which guy they're more afraid of. I still lean that I would bet on Lamb to out produce him down the stretch, but it's close.
Yeah, and it's such a unnecessary question because they're both wide receiver ones. They're both so locked in. I do think that Lamb, he had the positive coach speak heading into Thanksgiving. You saw Pickens with the 2 29-point weeks. We knew that we were going to get a Lamb game like this sometime soon.
Yeah.
Still a huge positive. His season high was 24 points here. Let's talk about one sleeper wide receiver. We'll start with Scott on this one. Scott, Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell has a massive, massive week. Mitchell had 12 targets. He's the only wide receiver in the entire Sunday slate to go over 100 receiving yards. Absolutely wild stuff. My top waiver wire ad this week in the article. Your thoughts on Adonai? Is this something where he's in our lineups for the rest of the season? And we could lower the expectations. Is he at least a wide receiver 3 rest of season, a player that can provide spike weeks and at least is going to have some sustainable target volume?
Yeah, I'll need to dig into the matchups and whatnot. And don't forget Garrett Wilson's expected back week 15. But yeah, I think somewhere around there, mid-range wide receiver 3 or maybe better. But yeah, this is awesome. It was Ask God week. Adonai Mitchell finally did it. Had a great game. since joining the Jets, he has a 30% target share. We were kind of telling you this was coming. He ranked top 5 in XFP last week, but the week before that as well, he just ran bad where just about none of that was catchable. And last week he ran good. And what I thought was really encouraging was Aaron Glenn had a quote following Adonai Mitchell's big game where he talked about how this wasn't just a throw in that trade. They really wanted him. They actually grew up together in the same, or they had the same hometown, and Adonai Mitchell went to high school with Aaron Glenn's daughter. But the end of the quote was, "This is a true X receiver. He has good speed. He can win one-on-one. I look forward to seeing him progress as the season goes on. For him coming back next year and being a huge part of what we're doing." Seems like they think he has, real X ability. He could be a real wide receiver 1 for them. And like, they're targeting him as such. So yeah, I'm pretty bullish on Adonai Mitchell here down the stretch.
Pat, your thoughts on Adonai?
Yeah, I mean, they've been trying to feed him targets since they got him. And, he's he's not always going to deliver on those targets. But, like, when he does, it looks awesome. It's kind of the J.J. McCarthy thing we talked about earlier. But it's a little bit more acceptable if you're a receiver, because if you hit a couple big plays a game, we have a good fantasy day from you, especially kind of at his cost, or kind of where you're going to have him, as a flex play type of guy. So I'm excited for it. I mean, he was a guy I drafted a lot actually in best ball, because it's like, it's a guy's completely free, and heading into the draft, people were talking him up as a first round talent, goes second round. Has kind of flashed anytime he's been given an opportunity, at least in terms of the ability to, make big plays, make some head scratching plays too. But yeah, I think this is real in the sense that the Jets don't have other playmakers right now, like at all. Right. Breece Hall is kind of the only guy that they can, reliably count on. So,
and they're not targeting him.
Yeah, it is weird. So yeah, I mean, I think
you have John Mechie in the Wandale role, who, like, Mechie hasn't ever been good.
No, he dropped in. He had a horrible drop in that game. It would have been an easy touchdown. Yeah, so I think they're going to kind of continue building the plane out of him until Garrett Wilson gets back.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Adonai Mitchell on the waiver show, I assume, was going to be rostered in every single NFFC, FFPC league. He's still out there. So it's sort of a potential player that in certain leagues he's still out there. It's potentially an edge pick or edge pickup, even in like really, really deep, really, really competitive formats. So if you have a little fab left in week 14, go get yourself some Adonai if he's available in your league. All right, guys, we've reached the end of the show here. This is what we came to talk about. We are making our fantasy football playoff bold predictions here. We're going to go around the horn. We're going to drop a flag plant player at each and every position. We're also going to give a sleeper pick. We're going to start out with you on this one, Pat. Running back wise, this whole season, it's just been dominated. The talk's been dominated by Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and now De'Von Achane over the last 6-8 weeks of the year. Last year in the playoffs, we saw the massive performance from Jonathan Taylor. Sort of a player that, if we were talking mid-season last year, none of us would have come up with Jonathan Taylor as the playoffs league winner. Who is a running back that could be in store to dominate the fantasy playoffs that maybe is a little bit under the radar right now?
I'll keep this quick because we already talked about him, but I'll say Bucky Irving. Scott mentioned the schedule there and getting the Dolphins in week 17. He gets Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Dolphins to close. You get receiving, you get the rushing workload, you get a talented player, good offensive line, and an offense that I think is going to want to establish the rock. So I'll say Bucky.
Love that one. Scott, who do you have at the running back position?
We talked about it last week, but Jahmyr Gibbs, I really wouldn't be shocked if he just does what he did last year at the tail end of the season and just kind of
or 2 weeks ago
is almost an auto win.
yeah,
exactly.
Big bold call with Jahmyr Gibbs there, Scott. I love that one. Very, very brave.
Under the radar.
Very brave.
Yeah.
Nobody's heard of him. I'll go with Chase Brown on this one. Chase Brown, I think this is really shaping up to be a really strong playoffs for him. He's had 15 points or more for 5 straight weeks. We now see the Joe Burrow bump. He had 7 targets with Joe Burrow in his first game back. And I love the playoff schedule. Baltimore, Miami, and Arizona for 3 weeks for Chase Brown. I think it could be probably similar scoring to a Bucky Irving, somewhere around like that 18 points per game mark. I think Chase Brown has a chance to put up some huge numbers. Pat, let's go back to you for this one. This is probably the most difficult one. Trey McBride completely dominating fantasy football. If another tight end emerges in the fantasy playoffs as a league winner, who will it be?
I mean, I wanted to say Brock Bowers. His schedule's scary, actually. His remaining matchups could kind of go against him, and the quarterback play is so bad. So I'm hoping it's Bowers because I've got so much. But I think George Kittle is probably the dude who we've seen over the years just have these massive spike weeks and is continuing to just be really efficient after a slow start. He's got 4 games now over 2 yards per route run, and looks to be back. And this 49ers defense isn't good now. Purdy's back. Purdy looks pretty good. And yeah, I think Kittle could kind of just turn in. Maybe it won't be the most consistent thing you've ever seen, but he could turn in, a couple of these games during the fantasy playoffs where it's like you had to have George Kittle that week.
Yeah, I know. We were rooting on Kittle. Like a lot of the argument with Kittle in the summer was the fantasy playoff schedule. So I really like that one. Scott, give us a tight end that you're bullish on heading into the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, you prefaced it by talking about McBride. Like no one is touching McBride at this position. McBride is like up there with JSN and Puka since Jacoby took over, and like any other tight end, you're just hoping is like a good, 15 fantasy point per game tight end. But yeah, I agree with that Kittle call. Should be much better volume production with Purdy. That's really his guy, where he's led in first read target rate in all 3 of Purdy's games. But before that, it was Jawan as the one. The stat I had was in his last 16 games with Purdy, he's averaging like 16 fantasy points per game, or 18 fantasy points per game, which is crazy good for the tight end position. If you remove like clear bad weather games, which was last week, and a few games at the tail end of last season, it jumps to like 21 fantasy points per game, which is also his average without Debo over the last like 4 or 5 years. So just a lot of the numbers really backing up Kittle as being probably the guy.
I'll go with a little more under the radar here. Brenton Strange. The Parker Washington injury, I think, opens things up. And a lot of times in fantasy football, history repeats itself. We saw it back in 2023 where it was like all those Evan Engram teams doing really, really well in the playoffs. I think that it's going to be like that for Brenton Strange. Obviously, he won't have the impact of a Trey McBride and certainly doesn't have the ceiling of a George Kittle. But I do think for a lot of fantasy managers, you were able to pick Brenton Strange up off of the waiver wire like last week. I think he could end up running pure and having like 15 points per game. A little bit of a PPR cheat code for this Jacksonville offense that's had some really, really fun moments. So I'll go Brenton Strange as sort of the sleeper tight end to have a strong fantasy football playoffs. Let's pivot over to the wide receiver position. Pat, for you, get us started here. Which non-obvious wide receiver could help fantasy managers win leagues in the fantasy playoffs? And I'll say we don't have to go back that far. Last year in the fantasy playoffs, Jameson Williams had that one huge week. 2 years ago, we had the Amari Cooper game that if you played best ball or if you had Cooper in any sort of a lineup, you needed Amari Cooper in order to keep going. I think that was also a week 15 game. So a lot of times you get these massive spike weeks and sort of places we're not necessarily expecting it, and those players can end up having huge win rates in the playoffs. Pat, is there any wide receiver that you're getting really strong vibes from that you'd love to have on a bunch of lineups, maybe non-obvious guy heading forward?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about Tedero McMillan. who you have
Ooh.
the Panthers kind of coming alive a little bit here over the past like 3 weeks. Seeing them upset the Rams is impressive, and not, I mentioned earlier that they just ran the ball a bunch, but Bryce Young was really efficient as well. And we've seen, like, early in the season, they had a high pass rate against the Cardinals, and they kind of had this like come from behind-ish thing that felt very like kind of vintage in a bad way, Bryce Young, where it's like they're never really in it, but they kind of felt like they were kind of in it, like if we get an onside kick, maybe we can win type of thing. And then they pivot to pounding the rock, and they're going to be, this really, really run team, really kind of identity run-based team. The last few weeks, it's felt a little bit more like there's trust there with Young, and he's played better. So I'm, he was bad against the 49ers. So it's like, it's a little bit hit or miss, but they get the Saints and then they get the Bucks. And I could see him being pretty good in both those games. Then he gets the Seahawks to close, which, could be a disaster. The Seahawks have an elite D, but we just saw them overcome the Rams. And so maybe that same formula of running the ball a bunch and then an efficient passing game off of that can pay off. And McMillan has been really good this year. I think it's been a little bit quiet in part because Ibuka was so awesome early, and he kind of stole some of the rookie wide receiver excitement. But he's just been kind of quietly chugging along here, and it's been like, well, he's held back by the lack of drop back volume and Bryce Young. But if we have a ceiling with the quarterback, which maybe we do, and if we have a little bit more confidence to have some drop back volume in let's say that Bucks game in Week 16, then I think McMillan can kind of be one of those dudes that it's like maybe it is the Amari Cooper, where it's the Week 16 game and not the Week 17 game, but that's still a huge deal.
Post bye week usage bump for T-Mac would just be an awesome thing to see for fantasy managers rostering him. Scott, who do you have at the wide receiver position? Maybe a player sort of that you think could take his game to new heights or just provide huge win rates in the fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, I think it's Terry McLaurin. You saw last week, he caught 7 of 14 targets for 96 yards and a score. 14 targets, 180 air yards, 5 red zone targets. It was good for 36.3 expected fantasy points. That was the third most of any player in any game this season. What was most impressive about this is 78% of his routes came with Patrick Surtain lined up across from him. It was also his first game back off of a 4-week layoff. He was on a snap count. He had just a 58% route share. And so, it's a small sample, but in games Marcus Mariota has started, he averages 3.8 yards per route run, a 0.37 target per route run rate, which would lead the league. So it really seems like this is Mariota's guy. And this is a player, not many people are talking about just because he's only played like 1 or 2 full games all year.
Yeah, I love that one. And that's an interesting one too, Scott, because people are sort of left him for dead. But had that big contract extension, would like to see end the season on like a positive note here for Terry McLaurin. For me, it all sort of comes full circle here. Pat, I remember when I came on Ship Chasing with you guys, I was like pounding the table for Jameson Williams, and then we had that really slow start to the season. Now things for Jameson Williams, it's like the roller coaster ride for Jameson Williams, where over the last 7 weeks, we've had 5 games with 16 points or more, and then 2 0-pointers, but everything's coming up Jameson Williams for the playoffs. It's finally happening. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown with an ankle injury, Sam Laporta done for the season, Jameson Williams with a season-high 10 targets on Thanksgiving Day, had a smash game. Now he gets Dallas in a huge game for both teams, gets Dallas this week, and a chance for another huge Jameson Williams game. And I think it's Jameson Williams' season all throughout the playoffs. I think Jameson Williams could end up being so good that both of you guys, when we get to the offseason, are going to say, I can't draft Jameson Williams here in round 4. His ADP's shot up way too much. Both of you guys are going to stay away from Jameson
This is where he went last year. He's going to be round 2.
Fine.
Yeah,
round
this
3.
is
round 3, guys. He's going to be
round
good enough
2.
to be a round 3 pick next week.
It's
next
always
year.
like a round. It's always a round higher than I think could possibly happen. That's where
And
it's
I can't wait to hear Davis Maddock telling you, Pat, Jameson Williams in round 3 is going to be the one you need. Expect that this summer because he's going to crush it in the playoffs, guys. Let's go.
I'm so pissed. Jameson drafters
are going to get bailed out.
Bailout.
Yeah.
It's Jameson bailout, guys. We're cashing the checks. Pat, let's go quarterback position. This is fun because quarterback seems a little more wide open than in other years. Give us a quarterback you're super bullish on that you think could be really, really impactful in the fantasy playoffs.
I'll just stay on brand here and say Drake Maye. He's, the Patriots schedule has been talked up as, the reason that they're, so successful. And I think to a large degree, it is one of the reasons that they're, vying for the 1 seed. But Maye has been awesome. And I don't think that's schedule related. And, that's good, right? Because he gets the Bills and he gets the Ravens. And then he gets the Jets in week 17. But the Jets have actually played better. But those are the games that from a fantasy perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, let's bring on a little bit more of a challenge and let's have an opposing offense that can push them. Now, the Ravens have been so out of sorts that maybe they don't deliver there. But the Bills, I do think we can count on in the rematch and a big game for them to push the Patriots on defense and elevate the drop back volume a little bit and potentially create a shootout situation. So the schedule stuff's been nice for the efficiency, but I want more volume. I want more of a back and forth environment. We do get that in week 15 off the bye for the Patriots. The offensive line's a little bit of a concern with Will Campbell and the other injury to their guard, but that's something I'm going to bet on Maye to overcome.
Drake Maye should smash in the playoffs. Scott, any other quarterbacks to add?
Yeah, man, I hope it's Drake Maye. I think it's Drake Maye just because the Exodia prophecy never misses. So I think that means Drake Maye has to go nuclear. He's right behind Stafford as the MVP favorite, and he's been so consistent. We just haven't seen those face melting spike weeks, and that would be really sick if they came during the playoffs. If it's not that, it's Jackson Dart, who leads all quarterbacks in fantasy points per game since week 6. I worry about, the Giants maybe telling him not to run, or maybe it's just like too in his DNA, like he has to run. And so it would be, if it's not Maye, Jackson Dart would be the
What if they start
watch.
throwing to him like Jameis Winston?
Hey, there's that. Yeah. Hey, Jameis Winston had a 35-point game just a few weeks ago. So
yeah, we would absolutely love to see that from Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart, we don't need, like Scott, we can name him next year's Exodia quarterback already. We know that the ship has already left the station there. I'm going to go
good,
Dak
man.
Prescott,
Dart's
guys.
good.
Dak Prescott's going to be mine. Dak, I think that the Dallas Cowboys might run the table here. They have 6 wins on the year. The team has now beat the Super Bowl runner-up and the Super Bowl champion in consecutive weeks. And Pat, like you talked about, he has 2 wide receiver 1s. This is an offense that I think has a chance to put up some really, really strong numbers. They're in Detroit in week 14, but the fantasy playoffs, they get Minnesota in Dallas, the Chargers in Dallas, and then that week 17 game in Washington. I think Dak Prescott can end up being a top 3 scorer at the quarterback position over the course of the fantasy football playoffs. Very, very bullish on him. Really, really fun stuff, guys. Let's go around the horn. This one is sort of dealer's choice. Let's call it a flex play, a sleeper. You don't necessarily have to have league winner here, but a player that's maybe a little under the radar that can go right into our lineups that you'd be really happy to have on all of your fantasy teams moving forward. Start with you, Pat.
Come back to me.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll go first.
I was going to say the same thing.
So we
go
get
first,
so we can get sort of the spirit of the question here. I'm going to go Christian Watson, who we all saw put up 18 points on Thanksgiving Day, and it could have been a lot more. Scott and I had him in a lineup. I'm sort of sending Scott text messages. We saw the multiple end zone targets. We saw 10 total targets, and everything's sort of just coming up for Christian Watson. I know there's people out there talking about Jaden Reed, what he's going to do when he comes back, and sort of Dontavian Wicks this past week. But it's Christian Watson. I think a healthy Christian Watson. Jordan Love looked very good on Thanksgiving Day. I think Christian Watson is going to be a wide receiver 3 with upside. Very happy to have him in the flex anywhere I can use him. Christian Watson, fantasy playoff Christian Watson. Pat, are you ready to rock on this question?
Yeah, I'll say Kyle Monangai as a guy who, 3 weeks from now, he like have emerged as, the starting running back is in terms of the rushing workload. Maybe not, an every snap guy, and Swift sort of more being like the receiving complement to Monangai as like the power runner. We're seeing the Bears, they just ran all over the Eagles. He got 22 carries, Monangai did there. Swift still had 18. But, kind of fitting the identity of the power running Bears a little bit more than DeAndre Swift. Swift's been actually pretty solid this year, but I think a little bit less of that like consistent downhill runner. So it'll be interesting to see if Monangai can build from, committee back who can kind of spike if he gets in the end zone to actually like projectable, 1A type of runner.
Kyle Monangai versus Christian McCaffrey in Week 17. Love that one with Monangai. Looked really, really good on Black Friday. Scott, give us a sleeper flex.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to steer this in a different direction because it's the School of Scott and I can do what I want. I wanted to bring this take up and hear your thoughts on it, Pat. I thought this was great. So I was doing the Sunday morning DFS show with John Proctor, and he was like, yeah, I think we're getting into that point of the season where we have to consider Sean McVay pushing Matthew Stafford to win MVP. I don't think this is like a crazy out there take or anything. It's like, well, this matters because remember 2 years ago with Lamar Jackson, it was him versus Josh Allen to win MVP, and they were neck and neck. Lamar Jackson had that game against the Dolphins, which was never competitive. And he threw 5 touchdown passes, deep into the game, leading by 3 scores. Why? Just to give him that edge in the MVP. And this is something that we think matters to Sean McVay, because you remember Puka Nacua, his rookie season, meaningless Week 18 game. Everyone is benched except for Puka Nacua. They get him the rookie receiving record, and then they stick him on the bench as soon as he gets it. And so, yeah, it's hey, Matthew Stafford heading into last week had 25 touchdowns, 0 interceptions across 8 weeks. You saw the Rams have this extremely high pass rate inside the red zone. Maybe that sticks to pad Stafford stats. The priority is for sure going to be winning, but then after that, you could just tip the scales a little bit with certain things like a very pass heavy rate inside the red zone. And so all this, I think you've probably considered this, heard this, but Johnny took it one step further. He was saying, I think Davante Adams is going to get multiple touchdowns this week. And if you don't know, Stafford has 12 touchdown catches over his last 6 games. He thinks they're actually going for the NFL record in receiving touchdowns. To beat Randy Moss, he would need to average 2 receiving touchdowns per game. So you have this basically Davante Adams as the goal line back, and it's working and it's easy. Yeah. And so that is something to keep in mind. What are your thoughts on that, Pat?
They've done it all year. They've done, it's like Puka kind of between the 20s and they get in close and all of a sudden it's just Davante Adams. I think he's one of like 3 receivers ever to hit 12 touchdowns twice in his career, I think. It's like Rice and Moss, I think, are the other 2. So yeah, as soon as when you were talking about this with Stafford, it's like if they're trying to throw for touchdowns, the whole time I was thinking about Davante Adams, because it's just going to mean Davante Adams scores like 20 touchdowns. I guess the record's 23. So, I don't know if he can get to the record, but like, could he get to 18, 19, 20 touchdowns? Yeah. And Stafford just had kind of an embarrassing loss. I saw the McCarthy meme in a Rams jersey. It was that level of disappointing. So they like a statement win against the Seahawks in Week 16 with like a actual pass heavy game plan, or they just stomp on the Falcons and the Cardinals to close, I think is very realistic.
I love that one. I think that's a great call, Scott. And only 2 players have ever hit 20. So Devontae Adams, he's already got number 3 in the books for the most touchdown catches in a season. His 18 touchdown catch season. So it's Jerry Rice and it's Randy Moss are the only 2 players to get 20 or more. I think that absolutely matters for a player like Adams, and I think it matters for Stafford as well. So love that one. And just to keep this show sort of full circle, guys, De'Von Achane is knocking on the door for the most yards from scrimmage by a Miami Dolphin ever in a season. The record is 2,216 from Ricky Williams back in 2002. Achane right now is at 1,404. So this is combined yards from scrimmage. I think he gets that as well. We're already seeing this insane volume, insane efficiency. So have a chance to see De'Von Achane set a Miami Dolphins record. Really, really strong stuff. This was a lot of fun today, guys. Really, really great stuff from you, Pat. Let everybody know once again where they can find your work.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com, Legendary Upside YouTube channel and podcast as well. Wherever you get your podcasts, check it out.
Yeah, and if you're into best ball, you might not get any better best ball analysis than Pat, who won $1 million freaking dollars playing best ball.
You got to remind people about that a little more, Pat.
I know.
Yeah,
come
like
on.
remind everybody.
That's a great seller.
If you're promoting a best ball product, you need to say, "Hey, and I won $1 million playing best ball, so you need to buy this product. It helps."
All right, I'll take you up on that. I actually won $2 million playing best ball.
That's right.
Much better. Awesome stuff. Yeah, highly recommend all of Pat's stuff. Pat, your Legendary Upside is awesome. I highly recommend Ship Chasing, and highly recommend you stick with Fantasy Points. We're dropping shows like this all throughout the fantasy football playoffs. Make sure you check out Fantasy Football Daily. Make sure you stick with us here at School of Scott. Check out Dynasty Life. And I'm dropping a new podcast with Brett Whitefield, the 2026 NFL Draft podcast. We're dropping our first episode this week, actually. Look for that Sunday on Fantasy Points YouTube. We're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush the fantasy playoffs this season.